Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of A God Shift. I am your host, Shayna Rattler, and I want to say thank you for being here and listening to this episode. I hope it's not your first episode, but if it is, I pray that it won't be your last. So I want you to do me a favor, if you will. Take a screenshot of wherever it is that y'all are listening to this episode and post that screenshot on your social media. When you do, I would love for you to tag us here at A God Shift. And also, I would love for you to give me your biggest aha moment or your biggest takeaway from this episode, because I believe that the more times that this information is shared, the more people can have hope in their life if they're in the middle of something, and the more each and every one of us can do our part in order to help build the kingdom. So thank you in advance for taking part in that little favor that I have for you. All right, I'm going to read my guest bio, and then we're going to get straight to the conversation. We're not going to waste any time. So my guest today has spent a lifetime focusing on relationships and encouraging others to cultivate their own healthy relationships by speaking at retreats, women's meetings, and Bible studies. She has a passion for mentoring and discipleship, whether it be one-on-one or in small groups. Married to a wonderful man since 1995, she resides in Phoenix, Arizona. She has 2 daughters, 2 grandsons, and 2 small, fluffy dogs. Losing Her, Finding Me is her first book. I want to welcome to the show, Michelle Rohlf.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Yes, I'm so glad you're here. I'm excited for this.
Me too.
This may be one of the last episodes in the season where we're talking about kingdom authority. We're going to see what the Lord says, but you may be the bookmark, Michelle, for the conversation on kingdom authority. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves and get into what is kingdom authority and what the heck do we do with that authority, I want to give a little bit of context for the conversation, because when people hear a God shift, they think it sounds pretty cool, but nobody really knows what that means but me. So my definition of a God shift is the moment a disruption in your life collides with God's purpose and it moves you into new dimensions of possibility. And I believe that when we're thinking about God's role for our lives and we're looking at where it is that he's taking us, that there's things that we can expect of him and that there's things that he expects of us. I believe that we also have a role to play in God's will for our lives. And I believe that one of the things that God expects us to do is to actually operate in the authority that he gave us, which is why I call it kingdom authority, because it's the authority that God has given us. And my definition of kingdom authority is the birthright of a child of God to actually be able to make things happen in their lives by partnering with what it is that scripture says. There's over 44 scriptures, Michelle, in the Bible that talks about the dominion and the authority that we have as believers. And so I always start all of my episodes off asking my guest, what is your definition of kingdom authority?
Well, I think that the thing that kept coming to me is my biggest lesson in my estrangement from my daughter was that what the worst thing that ever happened to me was her walking away from me, but it also became the best thing that ever happened to me. Wow. And I think the way it became the best thing, that kingdom authority, is after the first 6 months of whining,
Let's just be honest.
and mourning that loss, I did step into, okay, now what is there out? What's God have for me? What's out there? So if it's not to be a mother and a grandmother to this child and my grandchildren, then he obviously hasn't taken me home, so there must be something else.
Yeah.
And then my authority was to, what can I do to feel better? What can I do to do better?
Yes.
And that was taking that step into, my first step was going to the gym and start moving my body. Yeah. And then there was another thing and another thing, but it was that obedience first.
Exactly. And I love that you straight up said, I asked myself, what can I do? I didn't say, Lord, what are you going to do? You may have asked, like, where are you taking me? Why is this happening? All the things
Oh,
that
yeah.
make sense. But you didn't stop there. And you said, okay, Michelle, there's some things that you're going to have to do. Whatever it is that is going to happen next in your life, we may not even know right now, but there's some things that you're going to have to do. And that's the thing that I really want the listeners to grasp, is that when I'm talking about kingdom authority, we're not talking about all the things that God is capable of. We're not talking about all the things that he exceeds at, because we already know he's powerful. We already know that he's mighty. We already know that he can do everything and anything.
Yeah.
But I was listening on to a Facebook Live that a friend of mine did right before I came on to do this recording. And she says that one of her mottos is to work like only I can, and then pray like only God can. Pray like, for what only God can do.
Sure.
And I hope that our listeners realize that this is a relationship. This is a tandem. This is a partnership. There's certain things that we can expect of God. There's certain things that he can expect of us. And if we don't do the things that only we can do, then we have to stop expecting the outcomes that he told us that we can have.
Mm-hmm.
So I really want to hear if you can think of a time, like, what exactly did you do? So you said, one of the very first things I did was I took control of my health. And Lord knows that that is a form of authority in and of itself, to treat these bodies like a temple. So is that the only thing that you did, or what else did you do that you could look back and say, you know what? I operated in my authority to get on the other side of this disruption?
Yes, I did. That was my first thing, because I knew if I had a commitment with the trainer, I would at least get up and get dressed 3 times a week.
Right. If you at least had the accountability of somebody else, you knew you'd go.
That's right. And so I did that for a while. And then the next thing is I started to go to, there's Celebrate Recovery, which is a Christian-based 12-step program. So I started to go to that to just find out what was going on with me. A lot of times we'll just point at the other person and say, but they're mean and they did this and they what. But we always have a part, always, always, always. And even though it's hard to hear, it's just so true. And yes. So I went to this 12-step meeting I committed to it. I said, I'm going to go every week. So I did Celebrate Recovery. And then I also got a counselor and I worked with them, because it was not only the estrangement from my daughter, it was the fact that I was so enmeshed with her that my whole identity was in her. Wow. So when she walked away, she took me with her. She was my idol. She was my life. She was my everything. And God had to break me down to say, Michelle, I am your God. I am your purpose. I'm your person, not my daughter, not Naomi. So that was a huge thing. And then another thing, when you were talking about that we have a part that keeps coming in my head, is the book. When I wrote my book, I sat around thinking, okay, God, I know you want me to write this book, but I don't know how, I don't know what to do. I don't know whatever. So, and that's when the scripture, faith without works is dead, finally came alive to me. Yeah. Because I was like, oh my gosh. So I always thought that scripture meant that I never understood it, actually. Yeah. I was like, what do you mean faith without death and my God?
Yeah, godly good. What is this?
Right. What is that? But now it just totally made sense that God was not going to have a manuscript show up on my doorstep. Mm-hmm. I had to sit down. I had to put fingers to the keyboard, and I had to seek him, and I had to do the work. He wasn't going to do it for me. And so I did, and I just did it every day, and I did the best I could, and I prayed through it when I didn't know, and it became a book.
Yeah. And if we're not doing anything, then do we really have faith? Because I think that faith is our thoughts. Faith is, or I'm sorry, let me say that the way that I really mean it. Belief is what it is that we think. Faith is what it is that we do. And so if we're not doing anything, if we're only praying, if we're only waiting, if we're only just sitting back and seeing what God is going to do, then do we really have faith? Because when we're in the doing, and we're the word that you said before I started talking, when we're being obedient, then that's when we're really demonstrating that we have faith.
Mhm.
Not
Yeah,
just in praying, because praying is important. But
yeah,
after I pray, then what am I going to do? After God answers it, then what am I going to do? Am I going to then pray for confirmation for the answer to the prayer that he already gave me? I see that every single day.
yeah.
Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, that was pretty much it.
That's
That was a big one, was that, oh, that's what that means.
Yeah. And so when you look at this journey, you say, you know what? This is nothing that I would have ever hoped for. This is not something that I would ever wish on anyone. I'm estranged from my child that I love. It impacts the relationship that I have with my grandchild. Lord, what in the world is going on? I can only imagine what that would feel like to be, estranged from a child. And then you realize, you know what? I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I know that there's some things that I can do. You wrote a book, you took control of your health. What did you learn during that whole journey?
I learned that I mattered apart from her, that
Mm,
I had a purpose apart from being a mother or a grandmother,
yeah,
that our lives together did not define me,
yeah,
that I am defined, that God defines me and no one else.
yeah.
I learned how to forgive her, even though she didn't want it or ask for it.
Hmm.
And I learned I could live through a really hard thing
Yeah,
and be okay. By the end of it, because we are reconciled, it's
right.
not exactly what I wanted or what I expected, but I'm thankful for it. And I know
Yeah,
it's exactly what God wants.
yeah,
Um, but I knew even by the end of it, I was able to be happy and live my life and be thankful. And that's when the book was almost done at that point, and I was able to reach out to others and help them go through it and let them know that their life matters without their kids, uh, that we have purpose apart
yeah,
from others.
yeah. I hear personally, and, whether it's television or hearing other people talking about people that they know, it's usually women more often than not, but I don't think men are completely exempt from it, where they look back over their lives and they realize that their spouses and their children and sometimes their work became their identity, to the point that when that was gone, or that person was gone, and sometimes it's catastrophic, it's a death, it's an estrangement, but sometimes it's just they grow up and move out. They realize how much they lost themselves in that process. And so I imagine that this was probably a hindsight 2020 situation for you. And it's usually not in the first half of the conversation that I start asking for, give us some help, give us some advice. But I'm curious, when you look back, what would you tell a person today of how to strike the balance between, you should be committed to your role, but not so much so that you completely lose who you are? Do now you've got to reinvent and rediscover, like, I don't even know what I want or what I like. So what tip would you have for somebody that's committed to their role as they should be, but not so much so that they completely lose their identity and sense of purpose?
The biggest thing I'd say to a young mother with young children is to be sure you have a life outside of your children. Keep your friends, make time for them. They know who you are as a person apart from being a mother. Let them put that into you and remind you, and let you laugh and be silly and be kid, who you were before
Mm-hmm.
being a parent. I would suggest that you spend time alone, that you make a date with yourself. I did do that. There were some events in my life that happened that made me more and more enmeshed, where I put my faith in her instead of in God.
Yeah.
So it doesn't always naturally happen to everybody. I have seen it with a lot of people talking to me now, and this estrangement thing has become an epidemic. It's so many people, and now the New York Times is writing about it. Finally, people are starting to write about it. Good Morning America, I heard a segment on there. So it's definitely happening a lot, and I think it's this generation thinking, they're diagnosing themselves because of all the information, and they think that mom and dad should have done so much better. And there's a lot of advice, I guess, I would give more about, as your children become adults, to let them go. I actually have a reel on Instagram that's like gone viral. It's so many people, 100,000, and it's on 5 things never to do with your estranged child.
Wow.
And that is, don't try. I can't remember them right now. I'm too, but you can see it on. But when we hit to adult children, a lot of times we'll still try to control their lives. We'll try to. We think that they want our advice without being asked. And every time we do that, it just makes them angrier and push away from us.
Yeah.
And so we just need to accept them as adults, and that they're trying to find their way, and they're going to do the best they can. And yes, they're going to make mistakes.
Yeah, just like we did.
Absolutely. Just like we did.
And it's kind of like the same thing that we're talking about, of the balance of how we not lose ourselves when we're being so committed. We know that regardless of how old they get, that we still have a responsibility to give them support and guidance if they need it, or, give them opinions or whatever. But sometimes we can be such a safety net that, my parents were extremely guilty of always catching my son from falling. And I said, sometimes you learn how not to fall because you fell. But if you are a safety net to him and keep him from falling every time he falls, and trust me, I get it, not wanting to see him fall.
It's hard.
He's never going to learn not to fall if you never let him fall. And sometimes that's so hard, especially as a parent, to go, I can see this big train coming. I've told them the train is coming. I'm watching them walk right into the train, and they're still walking, and they're not listening, and they're not stopping. And so it can be very, very tough to kind of find that balance to say, I can no longer, I've done all I can do. I've said all I can say, and I can't be attached to the decisions that they make. And even though in my natural mind, I know that that's what I should be doing, it's so, so hard to do. But I love the advice that you gave. Like, if you used to dance, keep dancing. Shoot, ask your kids if they want to go dance with you. But it can't always come about, what does my spouse want? What does my child want? I can do it. People tell me, oh, you focus on them until they're 18. No, you focus on them until they're 18, but not at the expense of losing yourself.
Right.
So I'm
glad, that is so true.
Glad you gave kind of the structure of, finding harmony, because I don't think that there's any such thing as balance, because balance indicates that everything is always going to have equal attention. And I don't believe that there's ever going to be a time in life where you're going to give the same level of effort and attention to everything in your life. But I do think you can find a way to find harmony. And I think the advice that you gave on how not to lose sense of your own purpose and your own identity when you're committed to your roles and responsibilities that you have will be really, really, really helpful. So we're going to pause and take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about how everyone that is listening can actually operate in their kingdom authority. We'll be right back. This episode is brought to you by the free guide, When God Says Shift. Inside, you'll discover the 4 shifts required to reveal God's plan, to ditch disruption or delay, and get his blessings faster. Head to agodshift.com to access it now. All right, welcome back. So this is good already. Like I said, I normally don't get into the tips and the strategies until the second half of the show. But we're going to talk a lot about, like, how do you operate in your authority in this second half. But I know that so many people, like I said, suffer from, I'm so committed to what it is that I know that I have to do and what I'm supposed to do, that I look up 10 years later and I don't even recognize myself in the mirror. So I didn't want us to just make light of that and skip over it without really going deep and helping people in that area. So we'll get back to the regularly scheduled program now. Not that there is one, because we're going to go in whatever the direction the Lord tells us to go, whether it's the questions that we thought we were going to talk about or not. So we talked about before the break, all of the different things that you did to exercise your authority. You wanted to take control of your body and your health. You wrote a book. And authority can come in a lot of different forms. Sometimes people learn to use their voice and stand up for themselves and what they believe in. There's a lot of different ways that authority can look. So if someone is listening to this episode right now, Michelle, and they're actually struggling to recognize that they have authority, and maybe they're listening and they're like, okay, I now know that I have authority, but I still need something that I can do today, because I feel like my health is pretty good and I don't feel like writing a book. I don't think I'm called to write a book. So what would be, if someone is listening to this and they're really struggling to figure out how they can operate in their authority so that they can shift their life to a better place, what would be the best tip that you would give them?
Honestly, I would say, what do you want to do? What does your heart want? What do you want to do? Do something. Do something you love to do. If you want to jump up and dance, if you want to take a walk, if you want to call a friend, go to a movie, do you want to do a picture? There's so much that I don't know if it's other people, but I know for me, I will put those things I love on the back burner all the time. And
Yes.
And I don't know, I was doing a writer's tribe that I'm on, and she gave us these things that said, okay, what's your vision? Pick 3 things of these that are your top values. And I sat there and thought, oh my gosh, I don't even know what they are. And then she asked the question, which really helped. She said, what is it if you look at your day, what are 3 things that you naturally do, you look forward to doing, or that makes your heart happy? What are 3 things? And now that helped, because I could look at those things and say, okay, my number 1 thing, I love relationship. I love friendship. I love having a good conversation with my husband. I love talking to my daughters. That makes me happy.
Yeah.
So that's what I would advise. Think of something that makes you smile,
Yes.
that lights you up. Because it could be something that takes 30 minutes or 30 seconds. Really, a phone call, getting up and doing a jig or what.
Yes. Yes. And I would add that the key word in that is what you want. Like, in the show notes, I'm going to put the word you in all caps, because it defeats the purpose of everything that we've talked about for the last 20 minutes if it's not what you want. Yes. And for some of you, that's going to come natural. For some of you, you may be that person that we were talking about before the break that has lost sight of what it is that you want. And so maybe you need to re-explore. Were there things that you used to want to do in the past that need to be revisited? Or maybe this is a perfect time in your life for you to reinvent yourself and discover what it is that you want now. But I think that that is some of the best advice that has ever been given on this show, is that if you really want to operate in your authority, you first have to know what it is that you want.
Yes. And if you're like me, who didn't know I didn't know who I was, because my whole life has been a people pleaser. Yeah. I want you to love me, so you tell me what you want. Yeah. So for me to find that thing has been an identity crisis. It's like, well, I don't know what I like. I do that because you like it. I do that because you like it. One of my favorite things to do growing up was skiing, snow skiing. Wow. I loved that. I did it alone. I at 8 years old, I was going down that hill, I just loved it. And nobody else in my life skis.
Well, you're not doing that now because you live in Phoenix, Arizona.
We have snow in the mountains.
Oh, do you? Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, in Flagstaff, Arizona. We have a ski resort. I haven't skied it yet, but I definitely want to go back to that.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing. It's like, okay, stop thinking, well, I had a friend who said, I always thought I'd go hiking, but then one day I stopped and said, I hiked because my boyfriend liked to hike. I hate hiking.
Yeah.
So it is just really letting yourself be who you are. And it's not selfish. It's not bad. God's not going to be mad at you because you're going to actually think about yourself and how he made you.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Self-care, I can't take credit for this quote because it's not mine, but I heard someone say one time, self-care is not selfish.
It's not.
But so often we get mom guilt and we feel selfish if we're taking time for ourselves, not recognizing that if we're not first good to ourselves, if we're not built up, if we're not fulfilled, then it's going to be very difficult for us to operate it at our fullest potential for anyone else.
Yeah, my oldest daughter, Naomi, she'd say, Mom was so much better when she got back from a me day.
Ah.
And it was, I'd come home and I was peaceful and happy and I was excited to see them. It wasn't a job anymore. I was happy to be there.
Yeah.
But I needed a couple hours to get in my own mind, in my own brain, watch a movie, laugh, go shopping, take a walk, whatever.
Yeah. If you're listening to this episode right now and you know that you're one of those people that is always filling up everybody else, pouring out of you to fill up everybody else, I want you to stop right now and ask yourself, what have I done in the last 7 days to fill me up? And, you get to decide what that is. For me, it's a glass of wine and a hot bath. But, everybody does not like the same things. But I want you to ask yourself, what are you doing to pour back into yourself? Or who are you around that has the ability to pour into you? I love the fact that you said that you're part of a tribe that is part of other authors. You need associations. You need activities and associations that can pour back into you when you're the one that's typically pouring into everybody else. So if you don't do anything else that you've heard us talk about, you've got to figure out how to fill yourself back up when you're the one that's always pouring into everybody else.
Yeah, because what happens if we pour out all the time? We're empty.
Yes.
And we need to be poured back into. And that part of that is time with God. But a lot of time is with getting quiet enough to find out who we are.
Right.
What do we want? What do we have to say to ourselves?
Yes. So, Michelle, before we begin to wrap this up and we talk about the books and where they can find you and all of that good stuff, are there any final words that you would have for the audience today?
Yes, I would just really encourage anyone that's going through a difficult relationship with an adult child, or it's actually escalated to estrangement, to know that there is hope. There may not be any sense of reconciliation in the view ever that you can see.
Mm-hmm.
But for one thing, I know God is a miraculous God. He can do amazing things. And that relationship may be restored. But even if it's not, you have a relationship with yourself. Mm-hmm. And there are millions of people out there who need us.
Yes.
Need our voice, need our love, need our service. So you have purpose. And I just don't want you to waste it.
Yeah.
Go out there and get it.
Yeah, I don't want to. I find that I've said this like 3 times this week, but I don't want to get to heaven and have boxes full of stuff with my name on it that the Lord wanted to give me, but couldn't because of whatever it is. And I definitely don't want it to be my purpose. And I definitely don't want it to be the fact that what I was supposed to be doing was going to help someone else. And now they have boxes, on the shelf with their name on it of what they couldn't have because I didn't do my part. So very good. So Michelle, how can they follow you on social media?
I am on Instagram and I made it really easy. It's Michelle _Rohlf,
Perfect.
ROHLF. That's my Instagram. My Facebook is the same, Michelle Rohlf. And then I'm also on YouTube
Okay.
under Michelle Rohlf.
Okay, perfect. You kept it simple, stupid, just like I try to do. Everything's a God shift. If you're
Yes.
looking for me anywhere, it's a God shift. I keep it super simple. And what would you like to offer if someone is listening and they would like to take things further?
For me, like,
Yeah. So like if somebody is listening to this and they want more of what you have, like, do you have a freebie for them? Do you want them to buy your book? What do you recommend they do?
oh, well, I definitely recommend my book.
Okay.
My book is unusual from other estrangement books out there in that mine's a memoir.
Okay.
Mine is all my feelings and how it worked and all my history and why I got enmeshed in the first place.
Wow.
And then the whole story with my daughter and how, so the reason I wrote that is because I wanted people to know they're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt so alone. There was hardly anything out there about it when I went through it.
Yeah.
So my book will really help everyone feel like they're not alone in this journey.
Yes.
So I recommend my book. It's called Losing Her, Finding Me, and it's on all online, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, everywhere.
Okay.
The other thing is I do have on my website, which is Michelle Rohlf Writes. No, hold on. It's michellerohlf.com. And I do have study questions that you can ask for. If you want to do a Bible study, or if you happen to have a handful of estranged parents, then those are some questions that you can use for that.
Perfect.
And they're free.
I love stuff like that because you don't really know where to start, especially if you're in the middle of it yourself, or you're not in the middle of it and you just don't feel like you've done a great job in the journey. It's great for somebody to give you those questions to try to guide the conversation. And sometimes there's been books that I've read that I think the book was really intended for you to do it in a group, but I just asked the questions of myself. And I really learned a lot and grew a lot by answering the questions, even if it wasn't, a conversation that I was having with other people. But everyone, please share this, because even if you don't know someone who is estranged from a child, we all know someone who either already has lost their identity in their purpose in the caring of other people, or you can see that they're at the risk of doing so if they keep down the path that they are. So please share this so that people can get on the other side of what it is that is going on in their lives with much more grace and ease that they may without Michelle's expertise. So Michelle, thank you so much for being here on A God Shift. I really appreciate you. Audience, again, share this, and I will see you back here again next week. Bye-bye.